So if you've got any questions, I'll kind of look to the audience and you can pitch in as and when. I'm sure you'll have plenty. So, let's start with Scotland. Obviously, you played an informal role in the Better Together campaign, but you saw firsthand what was going on. Can you just talk us through the campaign?
Okay.
Tell us what you think went wrong, basically.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me, Anthony and others. Thank you all for coming along. It's a way to get off work for an hour or so thanks for coming along. What went right, first of all, is we won.
Yeah.
The no side, we won. Of course, the anniversary of the referendum is tomorrow, and a lot's happened in a year.
A lot.
I hadn't even become the leader of the Scottish Labour Party a year ago. I got 21 weeks in that job.
Not enough time to collect pension contributions.
No, and probably not as generous as here. Jeremy Corbyn's nearly had 1 week.
Yeah.
So he's only got 20 weeks to go to beat me. Let's hope, of course, he does serve much longer than that. So the referendum, we won. Why we had a referendum in Scotland is it was probably unavoidable. The SNP won the election 8 years ago. Nationalists believe in the creation of nation states, so they demanded a referendum. But the decision to have a referendum doesn't lie with the Scottish people, in a constitutional sense doesn't, nor in a constitutional sense does it lie with the government of Scotland. Scotland has two governments, of course, the UK government and the Scottish government. But the Scottish government does not have legal power to organise an official binding referendum. It could call a consultative referendum, which wouldn't in any way be binding and would have no legal status. But unlike the Spanish government, which in my ill-informed opinion is making mistakes in Catalonia, Spain has basically said no to the Catalonian independence referendum. The Spanish constitution, as I understand it, forbids the referendum for all sorts of reasons of Franco and dictatorship and kind of dictatorship of the mob, populist use of the mob. So that's in their constitution. We don't have it, as you all know, we don't have a written constitution. So once the SNP won an election, they said we want a referendum. Cameron was faced with a choice of saying no or saying yes, but in certain circumstances. And I think he did well in that regard. I think David Cameron, I'll turn this off, I'm sorry. I think David Cameron had a good referendum. I thought he did well. And just one aside, one anecdote relating to it. David Cameron came to Scotland during the referendum, and the Conservative Party struggle in Scotland, and I know the Labour Party is struggling at the moment. But it has become, and I don't like this, it's become countercultural to be a Tory in Scotland. There are about 400,000 to 500,000 people who do vote Conservative, but it's not something that people publicly admit to. Smoking, yeah, drink driving occasionally, but voting Conservative, no. So he came to Scotland and he knew the extent to which the SNP was saying if you vote no and stay in the United Kingdom, you're going to keep a Tory government. David Cameron came to Scotland during the referendum and he was self-effacing. He said, "This isn't about me," and he said on BBC in Scotland, "The effing Tories aren't going to be here forever. This isn't a chance to kick me. If you want to kick me next year in the election, but let's stay in the same country." And I bumped into him a couple of weeks later, because my daughter, who is 16, said, "That David Cameron isn't as bad as everyone said he is." And I told him that, and I said, "Yeah, I'm sure she's going through a period of re-education." And I said, "Yep, she's down a salt mine," because we didn't bring her up that way. But so I thought he did well I thought David Cameron did well in the referendum. He was self-deprecating. The mistake he made was, you won't recall this, but the night of the result, instead of announcing great and then getting on the first plane to Scotland and building bridges and saying let's all work together, he announced an entirely legitimate policy, English votes for English laws. And a lot of Scots said, "You've announced this at 3 o'clock in the morning as the votes are still being counted. You had this plan before the vote. Why didn't you tell us those were the rules of the game? Why didn't you say we're going to stay in the deal is you stay in the UK but you have less influence within the UK?" And that's led to a genuine, I think a well-founded sense of you told us one thing, and to some extent, you're doing something different, and that's where I think he messed up.
Was there like a tipping point, do you feel, during the campaign that suddenly it became clear that actually the SNP could win it? Or did you feel that right from the word go, you thought, right, this is going to be a really tough battle and we may lose?
There wasn't one moment, except for about 10 days before it. There was one big moment 10 days before it, which was the second TV debate. There was two big TV debates between Alistair Darling, who was the chair of the all-party Better Together campaign, Labour, Conservative and Lib Dems together, along with the Civic Society and others, versus the Yes campaign, which was the SNP and others who were in favour of that argument. And Alistair was the chair of it, so he was the spokesman. So it was Alistair versus Alex Salmond. Alistair won the first debate on points, not dramatically, but everyone said he won the first debate, and he lost the second debate really pretty badly. And that was the only, in my opinion, the only genuinely big breakthrough moment for the Yes campaign. The view was, because it was all about the currency, which currency would an independent Scotland use? Now, the legal position, but hey, the truth didn't really matter. The legal position was, if the rest of the United Kingdom didn't wish the Scotland to use sterling, then they could use sterling as pieces of paper in a bartering sense, but it wouldn't have a legal status across the United Kingdom. So Scotland would be left without an official currency, and as a new member state of the European Union would have to commit to joining the euro. That's a complicated truth, which Alistair Darling told, but Alex Salmond just said, that's a scare story. Are you telling me England's going to come and take the pounds from our pockets, purses and wallets? And Alistair said no, at which point Scotland was getting to keep its own currency, getting to share the UK currency. So that was a breakthrough moment. But the SNP had already caught up by then. And it was just gradual. And it was a sense of, if you love Scotland, you should vote for independence. If you love Britain, you should vote to stay part of the United Kingdom. And we're all complex in our identity. And we won't all have time to talk about our different cultural identities, but not one of us. Well, it would be very unusual if we were singularly homogeneous in terms of our identity. But most people in Scotland, not all, but most would say we're Scottish first. I think more so than in England, where more people in England would say they're British and then English, although there's probably a trend of convergence there. But most people in Scotland would say, I'm Scottish first, and then I'm British. I would certainly say that. But they had successfully, over a period of time, managed to capture the imagery, the culture, the sentiment, the history even of a nation, and somehow monopolised it to the Yes cause. And sometimes I felt when I was doing TV debates during that thing, the audience, I've built this up wrong, it's not a great image for you, I accept, that the audience perceived me to be kind of wearing Union Jack boxer shorts under my suit, like it was Britain first. But the truth is, I wanted Scotland to stay in the UK because I think it's good for Scotland. Sorry if that sounds self-interested. And at the same time, when it comes to the European Union referendum, I want the UK to stay in the EU because I think it's great for the UK. If I thought it was good for the UK to leave the EU, I'd vote for it. It's not, for me, it's not a grand political project. Every UK election, and I say this as someone who's a member of a party that's lost many more elections than it's won, I think there's only 2 Labour leaders out of the last 10 who have actually won a majority. 2 out of 10. So for younger people here, you think, oh, well, it's a kind of mix and match. You get Labour for a while, you get Tory for a while, you get Labour for a while, and you've lived mostly through Labour. That, as most of you know, that's just not the norm. 2 out of 10 leaders have won a majority. But every election since the Second World War, bar one, I can entirely understand the result. And actually you can entirely see the logic. The only one I don't understand, and I'm delving into history, is that obviously Winston Churchill lost to Clement Attlee post-war in July 45. Attlee became Prime Minister. Churchill seemingly went into retirement, but returned and defeated Attlee after the Labour government had initiated the National Health Service and much else besides. And that kind of return of Churchill is the only election I can't understand. I know there are arguments for it, but every other election you can retro-analyse and say, public got it right. Even when it hurts my party, you can entirely understand it. So the British public, who can be, individuals can be extreme, individuals can be ill-informed, individuals can be eccentric. The aggregate decision they make, you can always say, you know what, they get it about right. So the general election before this one, the view was no one was worthy of winning. So no one won. And then this time round, they didn't think Ed Miliband should be Prime Minister. And therefore David Cameron won an unexpected victory.
And what part do you think Scotland played in that? Because obviously Scotland was a massive shocker, I think. Did you expect it to be that bad?
When I became the Scottish Labour leader, we had about 20-something% of the vote, and we ended up with 20. It made no difference because people weren't listening. And passions were so high because the referendum was a year ago tomorrow, and the election, of course, was in May. But for many people, the election in May was referendum round 2. You so-and-sos, you stopped us being a normal country, so we're going to punish you, the Labour Party. So what you had is you're a 55-45 split at the referendum, 55% to stay in the UK, 45% to leave. But if you remember the 45%, you've only one party to vote for, SNP. And if you get 45% of the vote, you win every election, almost every election in this country. So the three, Labour, Tory and Lib Dems, had to compete with each other for the 55. So it was going to be truly awful. And passions are so high. Even now, people offer impolite observations about me in the street. I've written an article for next week's New Statesman about this, about what can you learn from the Scottish referendum and Jeremy Corbyn's victory, and what does it mean for the European referendum. And on the basis you have uttered a profanity already, I'll do the same. Sometimes people shout at me, and so many people shout at me in the street, I sometimes think my first name has changed to Murphy and my surname has changed to Ya Bastard.
Should there be an English Labour Party?
Yeah, I'm happy, I'm comfortable with that. I can't see why not. You see, the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup starts, this weekend? Tomorrow? Okay.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, in England, yeah. They're all going, yeah, tomorrow, they all know about it. I got pictured with the trophy yesterday. It's the nearest any Scot will get to it. But when you watch it on telly, if you go, it'll be England flags. Now, 20 years ago, some of you will know this, football, maybe rugby, certainly football, would be the Union flag. You go watch England and you see England playing football now. It's the flag of St George, it's not the Union flag. So, I mean, it's not for me to intrude into the nature of Englishness. I think England, in my opinion, forgive me for sounding complacent, because I know there are examples and outbursts where this doesn't happen, but I happen to think England is the most tolerant part of the United Kingdom. It's the most patient and understanding part of the United Kingdom. Certainly if, at the moment, Scotland gets £1,200 more per person per head in public service investment, right? And you all go, oh, well.
Oh, I know.
Well,
the ban at
there might be a reason.
Yeah.
Do you know, if England was getting £1,200 more per head, we'd be invading you. And we've got all the nuclear submarines. So there's nothing you could do.
Not for long.
Yeah, that's a problem if we were independent.
I just want to sort of touch on, was the election of Jeremy really a reflection on the other three candidates not making strong enough arguments?
It's a lot of reflection on lots of things, but the main thing is, to hell with you all. To hell with you all, we want something different. There was also a train of thought which was, in 2010, no matter which brother you voted for, certainly if you voted for David, you could argue that you were voting for your choice to be the next Prime Minister. And people who voted for Ed were also, I think, had that view. I didn't vote for him, so I didn't have that view. And less people thought that this time. There were fewer people who thought, you know what, this is a vote for who we think is going to be the next Prime Minister. I can protest. And there's a general sense of, to hell with everyone, to hell with the establishment, to hell with the established politics. I'm angry. What's that movie? I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. I forget what movie. what was it? Broadcast News. It was like a scene from, go out and watch that movie. It's like a little bit like that. I'm sick of it all. And you know what? I'm not going to compromise. I am not compromising with what I believe in. So I'm going to vote for this guy. And actually, I don't see him as a candidate. I see it as a cause. It wasn't about this isn't about Jeremy because, as I say, I'm not going to criticise his integrity at all. He believes passionately what he believes. He's always believed it. I don't think that's a strength, incidentally. I think if someone always believes the same thing, I think it's pretty dogmatic. I think it's a sense of weakness, not strength. Everyone changes. We all change our mind to something. Maybe not in the big issues, but in some of the smaller ones, we nuance or reflect on our views. But it wasn't about Jeremy as a candidate, because any candidate that has to finish a speech finish most, if not all, speeches with, "Thank you very much," isn't a good speaker. A good orator who should be able to motivate a movement shouldn't need as a signal to their audience, "I finish now by saying thank you very much."
Oh God, I don't know what I'm going to say at the end now.
I was thinking, I realised when I was going to say that I wondered what you were going to say. But a real orator should make you want to think, have they finished yet? I want to get up and applaud.
Do you think the longer Corbyn stays in power, then the sort of mindset of everyone will believe that the centre ground is slightly more left? Or do you think the longer he stays, people will get more fed up with him?
No, he's not Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy, the view around the Democrats at the time was, you can change the political gravity, the centre, the kind of spectrum of political opinion as a candidate. There are very few people who do that. Mrs. Thatcher didn't manage to do it. You have to be, in my view, you would usually have to be in government to do that. So Blair did it in certain ways on issues such as minimum wage, on civil liberties, gay marriage. Okay, didn't introduce gay marriage, but change the kind of centre of gravity in politics. That's in. Mrs. Thatcher did it, but they do it as a powerful prime minister. He won't move the centre of gravity. The politics of come and join us over here doesn't work. Shouting at the public to come and join you doesn't work. You become a protest movement, it doesn't work.
But surely it did. I mean, on social media, certainly I've had it, whereby there are so many people shouting from the far left.
Absolutely. But Twitter isn't the real world.
But I think a lot of people get confused that it is.
They definitely do, and that way lies danger. I like to believe I'm not as hated in real life as I am on social media. But then I go home and then I figure out it's even worse.
Any other questions before we finish up? And I don't thank anyone.
Look, the reason why I might sound pessimistic, I'm just being open and honest. Look, if I was still in politics, my answers would be slightly different. I'd be trying to convince you that, look, this Corbyn thing might work out for the best.
We've seen a lot of those faces the past few days.
Look, I'm not a member of Parliament, and I didn't make the mistake of being in his shadow cabinet, right? And therefore I'm free from. It's the first time in nearly a quarter of a century. Now, I didn't choose this, right? But on the basis that I didn't choose it, I'll make a virtue out of it, which is that for the first time in a quarter of a century, I can actually share what I think. Now, I'm not usually a relentless pessimist, because pessimists don't really join political parties. Right? Pessimists sit in front of the telly and shout at the telly about political parties. Right? In all parties, it's usually optimists who join and try and change things. But on the basis it's a freedom I haven't had for nearly a quarter of a century, I'm quite enjoying it. Okay. Wow. Is that okay?
That was okay.
That's as optimistic as you're getting.
That's definitely
Invite me back
optimistic.
in a year and I'll say my ill-founded pessimism was ill-judged. David Cameron resigned under the weight of the scrutiny of Mrs. Jones from Hertfordshire, sending a furious email that Comrade Corbyn read out. And he said, "You've got me there. You're right. I resign." and George Osborne couldn't come up with a smart answer, so they both resigned.
Can I make a suggestion?
not very
We
confident.
might try to finish with something completely different.
Okay.
Okay, so here it goes. It's a bit like we were talking about the national anthem and whether you do or you don't like it. But of course, you know, fortunately as Scots, we were seldom called upon to sing the fourth verse, because you never get that far.
Yeah.
And of course, the fourth verse is about...
Rebellious Scots to crush.
That's it. That's our national anthem. We have to sing about
Do you know,
crushing
but It's
us.
fair enough, on the basis that the Scottish national anthem is a dreadful dirge about killing the English.
Well, it is, but it reminds me of a Billy Connolly sketch where he talks about, you know, how the Scottish one is also absolutely terrible. And he makes a suggestion which perhaps we could finish with today, and that is, and it takes us back to something you were saying earlier on, the Scots should actually adopt the theme tune from the Archers as their...
Oh, Billy Connolly
absolutely.
did do a sketch with that, you're right.
So maybe
And he
that's
got
how
a walk as
maybe
well.
that's how we finish on a bright note. We just hum the Archers and leave by the back door.
Brilliant idea.
But anyway, it's been fantastic. It's ranged from Scottish politics to national and international, and I think it's been very honest and very open, and I think we've very much enjoyed your insights. So I'll leave the rest unsaid.
Thank you.